I call to order the City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for August 19th, 2024. Clerk Clark, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember O'Rear.
Here.
Councilmember Root.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Roche.
Here.
Councilmember Pinkerton.
Here.
Councilmember Hutchings.
Here.
Mayor Shewmaker.
Here. Please rise as you are able and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Each member of council has received a copy of the minutes for our July 23rd Committee of the Whole meeting. Were there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will stand approved as written. Item 5, citizen comments. This time I call Ellen Bradshaw to the podium.
Yes. And then this is for just Dianna.
Okay.
Ellen Bradshaw, 206 South Almond Drive, Simpsonville, 29681. Good evening. Some of you may recognize me from the City Council meeting over a year ago, or maybe from one of the local news stations where I've appeared, bringing awareness to an ongoing serious issue. That issue being the flooding of my home and the surrounding neighborhoods here in downtown Simpsonville. As you can see from the photos, we flood horribly when it rains. Since our property can only hold so much, this backup of water also starts to flood the homes behind and in front of us. As the homeowners, it is a nightmare that we cannot wake up from. For my husband and I, the stormwater laps up against the windows of our home. Imagine the FEMA photos you see of flooding from big hurricanes. That is what we go through with each heavy rain. Our entire over half-acre property drowned in 7 to 8 feet of standing water. Stormwater that easily makes our 6-foot fence disappear. The crawl space underneath our home, gushing with the city of Simpsonville's stormwater. The road in front of our home, impassable. The foundation of our home that was rebuilt in 2022 is now crumbling and riddled with cracks and holes. The air vents have stagnant, putrid stormwater in them. The floors are sloped and warped. The drywall is cracked. The beams are waterlogged. There's a constant risk of mold-related illness. Both our AC unit and heater have been knocked out. Since moving into this home in April 2022, this type of flooding has occurred 10 times. We know that we cannot continue to live here. With many new developments over the years and little focus on stormwater retention, our property has become the city of Simpsonville's retention pond. Based on the information I obtained through the Greenville County engineer, approximately 138 acres drains toward our yard. With the lack of proper drainage and improper equipment for this profound amount of water, extreme flooding has occurred over the last 40 years. I have a newspaper article from 30 years ago that shows the road in front of our home being washed out by stormwater. This is incredibly overdue on being addressed by the city. The city must prioritize an affordable and effective solution to address the severe flooding issue plaguing our community. The most viable option, a buyout of our property, along with other heavily impacted homes in the area, to create a green space that can absorb water and protect neighboring properties. This solution will allow us to escape the deteriorating conditions we currently endure. Given the constant flow of water onto our property and the frequent flooding, the only logical next step is to demolish our home so that no one has to live this nightmare anymore. We must leave. This is an urgent issue that can no longer be delayed. Addressing it is not just in our best interest, but also essential for the well-being of all affected families. Other residents are facing the same distressing circumstances and need the city's assistance. This is where your resources and attention should be directed. Imagine if this were your home, your child's home, or your parents' home. What would you do? We urge the city to act swiftly and decisively on this time-sensitive matter. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw.
Thank you.
Next is Rod Folk.
My name is Rod Folk. I'm at 18 Cloverfield Drive in Simpsonville, 29680. I'm talking about impact fees. My understanding is that the state has regulations that limit what a municipality can and cannot do with the impact fees. I don't know when or why they created regulations. They were probably trying to solve some problem back then. After all, the legislators in Columbia are logical, reasonable people. What I do know is that Simpsonville is not the only city trying to cope with the unexpected and unplanned growth throughout South Carolina. What I also know is that the state government is there to serve the people, including municipalities as a collective of people. State government is not there to have the people or the municipalities serve it. So if you find the regulations are too restrictive and put an undue burden on the city's ability to serve its residents and provide the fiscal responsibility needed to support a well-run city, then lobby the state to fix the regulations. You with the Municipal Association of South Carolina, other cities, yourselves, and city residents to lobby for the state for changes. In a world where so many people now have access to education and cheap tools of innovation that happens from the top down tends to be orderly but dumb. Innovation that happens from the bottom up tends to be chaotic but smart. The same is true of our laws and regulations. The city needs to make sure the city needs to make smart innovations, accept a little bit of chaos in exchange for a lot of state mandated order. That's all I wanted to say about impact fees. I also want to mention something for the Public Works Department. Specifically, I want to give some praise to the people who run around with the garbage trucks and collect all the trash on the garbage. They do a really, really good job, in my opinion. They're courteous, they're careful about the other vehicles in the neighborhood. The trucks are not loud. You can't hear them a mile away. You hear them pretty much a couple of houses down. But the people that run that, they're very good. So I want to praise that department, particularly the people that are running it. They're doing a good job. The people that run that big claw machine that takes up the trash, it just magically disappears and you don't know it. I'm sure that a lot of people have come up here and said praise about public works and trash pickup. So just add me to that list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Folk. I will tell you, Mr. Folk, that Mr. West, the head of the Public Works Department, is here, so he heard your comments directly. And Pete Root is here from Public Works as well, so that was well landed. Thank you. Item 6, staff reports, beginning with 6A, financial report, Christine Furino, our finance director. Director Furino.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is starting the new fiscal year, so a couple highlights from the July financial report. General fund revenues for July were $222,000 with expenses at $3.3 million. The sewer fund revenues for July were about $198,000 with expenses at $51,000. The hospitality accommodations revenues for July were about $79,000 with expenses coming in at $307,000. The Public Works Enterprise Fund revenues for July were about $7,800 with expenses at $73,000. And be glad to answer any questions.
Council? Thank you, Director Furino.
Thank you.
6B, City Administrator Report from our Administrator Dianna Grayson. Ms. Grayson.
It does that every day. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to hit a few highlights from my Administrator's Report for this month. As far as the municipal complex goes, I did include in there a formal ceremony to dedicate the buildings and having that open house. That date is going to have to be changed now. We are looking at December 11th. The reason being the county is not planning to move into their summer court building until December 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And so we wanted to make sure that that was included in the open house and dedication of that property. I think it's best to do all of those together. So we're going to have to change that date. And then it's been a while since we've talked about financing for the municipal complex. In fact, I think the 3 new council members have probably not been as privy to that information. And so I wanted to remind everyone where the funding is coming from for the municipal complex. We did issue an installment purchase revenue bond in the amount of $12.5 million for that project. We also issued hospitality and accommodations tax revenue bonds at the same time. This was in June of 2021. A small portion of those bonds are going toward the park part of the project. Additional funding sources are the capital projects account and ARPA funding, and fund balance from the general fund. We're spending down some fund balance to complete this project. And the reason I wanted to bring that to your attention is I think there was a question about ARPA funding and whether or not there were funds left. That money has been exhausted, and part of my report includes the latest report made to U.S. Treasury on the expenditure of the ARPA funds. And also because now that we're spending some fund balance, it's going to skew your monthly report as far as the administrative budget goes from this point forward, because those are of course not budgeted expenditures, but they're coming from the general fund. They have to be coded that way. And so you'll see, I wanted to let you know so you don't get alarmed when you see that we're probably going to end up well over the budget for the administrative line item. But it's not. It's just we're trying to remove, or at least show you, the money that's being expended on the municipal complex. Downtown revitalization and streetscape, we are down at DHEC now for land disturbance permitting, finally. So once we get the permits back, and we're still making progress on the acquisition of rights of way and easements, then we will be ready to bid that project out. I anticipate it going out to bid by the end of the year, with construction starting early next year. As a reminder, on City Park, the majority of that park will be open when we move into our buildings, and our move date is November 1st. So I know all of the people are probably asking me, when is the playground at City Park reopening? I get that question a lot. The answer to that is also November 1st. While parts of the park still won't be complete because we have to demo the current police and fire buildings, most of the park will be complete at the point when we move on November 1st. Gymnasium renovation, we have completed that. We actually ended up saving about $40,000 from the original contract that we had with Edifice. The way the CMAR works is if there are cost savings on their end, we get a portion of those savings back to us. So we ended up well under budget for the money that you all budgeted in the last fiscal year for the gymnasium renovation. We are referring to that space now as Academy Hall. It is event space that's available for rental to the public, and those rentals will begin in the month of November. I think that's most of the highlights I wanted to give you, but if you have any questions about anything else on the report, I'm happy to answer.
Council? Councilmember O'Rear.
Out of curiosity, what will be the most common use of the Academy Hall when it's rented? Just special events?
Special events, family reunions, wedding receptions.
So people have to bring in like their own caterers and stuff like
Yes.
that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. We created a limited catering kitchen where one of the locker rooms used to be. It's got a warmer and a refrigerator and an ice machine. But yeah, they'll have to, and part of the last of the renovation to City Park will include adding a drive behind the Arts Center to accommodate catering vans and things like that, so they can load from the rear of that building.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Council? Thank you, Administrator Gracely. Our department representatives are available for council comments and questions, and I'm going to call Fire Chief Harold Nichols to the podium to make an introduction.
So we meant to do this for the last couple of weeks, but forgot, I guess. But I want to introduce to you Travis Bone. He's our new assistant chief that will be here in my absence and that kind of thing, just so you know who he is when you see him out and about. And, he's been with the city over 20 years, so he's been here a long time too. He's very capable.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Assistant Chief Vaughn. I apologize that we've met you 2 times before this without getting you up to say hello.
Yeah, I understand. Everybody's busy.
Yeah.
Just come by the office anytime.
All right. Thank you for being here. Are there any questions for any department representatives? Councilmember Root.
Chief Hanshaw, just real quickly, if you may. Administrator Grayson, maybe you'd help me. I know last meeting we passed the new speed limit signs for Poinsettia. Are those up, or when will this be changed?
Public Works is working on those new speed limit signs now. It's going to take probably a couple more weeks to have all of those installed, and the police department can't do any enforcement until the signs are replaced throughout the neighborhood.
Okay, may have wasted your trip. But if we could coordinate that with
Yes.
some police presence up front. I know you all are all over the place, but really the way to get this up front, I don't know when the speed limit changes unless I vote on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recognize them, so just to kind of get a little, not sounding to pull over a lot of people and write tickets, but if they know, then they know, and I think if we police it up front, then they'll get the hint. But that's all. I didn't know that they weren't up yet, but if we could coordinate that with
Yes.
the police.
And Chief Hanshaw and I have had conversations about it, and he knows that they can't enforce the 20-mile-an-hour speed until those signs are erected. But we've also talked about in the interim trying to, as much as they have resources available, to step up enforcement in that area, and they'll be able to ticket people for speeding at 25 miles an hour because people go through there very fast, as you all know, especially those of you who live in that neighborhood. So we'll start some enforcement, they're always doing it, but we'll try to do a little bit more of that in advance of the speed limit change, and then hopefully the officers can let people know the speed limit is going to be reduced even more. So
Okay, thank you.
We traditionally give them a 30-day period where we do warnings instead of immediately going to tickets. That gives them a transitional period, so once the signs are up, that'll give them about a month to get used to the adjustments and stuff. But we are making an effort, we'll make our presence known and make sure we're on top of that.
A follow-up question. My apologies, Mayor. Go ahead.
Were you moving on from that topic?
I was.
All right, well, let me stay on that topic for just a second. The speed limit is 25, so instead of just going to just straight warnings across the board for 30 days, I would think you would still kind of do, you end up being about 50-50 to, okay, we're not going to write you a ticket on 20, we're going to write it on 25, but the speed limit is now 20.
Right, we just typically do that to give everybody a chance to adjust to the fact that it has changed. Because some will be up to speed and know what's going on, others will not because they're not going to be in the loop. So it's just something we usually do as a courtesy to give them a transitional period from any time we change the speed limit. So.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Rick.
If I can jump in on that topic real quick, that might be something good to put on the city website and Facebook page and everything. I know everyone outside of Point City will see it too, that's on the page, but I think that'd be another good use of the city's.
we will definitely do that as soon as those signs are up.
All right, thanks.
Just to piggyback on something we passed, I can't remember if it was the beginning of the year or last year, the parking lot cut-throughs, what's the feedback that you're getting from that from your officers?
I'm not aware that we've had a tremendous amount of tickets or anything issued. I know they've been made aware and they're supposed to be putting the efforts into paying attention to that. But I'm not sure without going back to look to see if there's any. And again, I have to look at the data to see what we have, if anything has increased. But to my knowledge, we haven't seen any kind of crazy influx in any of that. So it must be working to the point when we put the stuff out there, we're not seeing a tremendous amount of trouble with it.
Are we getting less calls from the city, from business owners? Have you seen a correlation from that new ordinance that we passed?
I wouldn't typically get those calls. I'm not aware of any. I will tell you that the impetus behind that had a lot to do with the cut-through traffic that comes through our parking lot, where we've had employees almost struck by vehicles because when they cut through here, they don't do it slowly, they do it really quickly.
Yeah.
And it's been dangerous. So the hope is that there will be a police officer there to make a point of it when it happens.
Last Tuesday's meeting, I almost got
It happens to us all the time.
right over here. So I just did getting feedback on what we passed and how that was working, but that's all. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll keep an eye on it.
Councilmember O'Rear.
Pete, what's the actual violation written if someone's cutting through somewhere?
That one will be under the city ordinance which you guys passed. There's also, I think previously it covered the cutting through using like say a gas station on the corner to cut through. So it's all within the ordinance. I'm not sure what I think it's, one of recited incorrect.
Well, yeah.
It's been a long time since I've wrote one of those tickets, but it covers that kind of stuff, cutting through the parking lots of the gas station on the corner, and now cutting through like City Hall parking lots to avoid traffic. With the construction, we've seen an increase in some of it, which I believe is part of the problem we had with all the stuff going on, people in the traffic trying to find quicker routes with their impatience.
All right, thanks.
The reason it was important to have the city ordinance is because the state law is avoiding an intersection is the violation. This is not technically an intersection because we're not on the corner, so that's why city staff thought that it was important to bring to council, and you all passed it, an ordinance that would be, cutting through parking lots, since the state law didn't really cover what was happening out here.
Councilmember Roche.
Just thank you again for bumping up the patrols in my cut-through neighborhood. The neighbors that value safety love you for it. The ones that violated the stop signs, they don't love you as much.
We're used to, we're not in the business of making friends.
But anytime you want to do that again,
Anytime you guys are having a problem with it, and let other folks know, we encourage you to give us the feedback, let us know what they're seeing, and we'll allocate the resources in the best way we can to try to address it.
thank you very much.
Council? Any other department head questions or comments?
I won't drag Robbie up here, but don't forget what we talked about after the last meeting about the tackle football stuff. About the scholarship activity for that. We had identified that particular sport. So we had a conversation about it.
Yes, we haven't had any scholarships for tackle football this season, but we have identified a couple families that need, that we've helped. City council has helped, city council has helped. So we're taking care of the kids that need to have, because I don't know if many people know, this year we did not issue football helmets. Concussion protocol over the years has really put that on a high level with people. Our flag program has been sky high as our tackle program has been down, but it's all down through the whole strip. So liability is an issue too. So, but we have helped families. Dick's Sporting Goods has helped us with that as far as taking care of families that needed some help. So,
all right, we'll stay in touch.
But our motto has always been here at the rec department is we're not turning a kid away. That's what we're there for. We'll find a way. And I just want to bring it. You don't really hear us want to say much all the time, but I want to talk to you guys. September 19th. Just put that on your calendar. Break out your skateboards, your bicycles, your helmets, your knee pads. Come down to Alder Park. We're going to have a celebration of the pump track. Has some good help with Ms. Carter, Public Works Department. We're trying to spruce some things up. Got some surprises for you. We'll have some music, we'll have some food. We've kind of cleared the park opening a little bit. We're working on the basketball court. So we got some fun things planned, and want y'all to be a part of it. Got some surprises I want to share with you, but put that on your calendar. And again, tell the neighborhood kids, let's have a party. So pump party, September 19th, 5 to 7 p.m. Yes, sir.
You stole my thunder. I was going to thank you for all that you've done with that. It's been a very positive thing for the area of the neighborhood.
It's been a team effort. It's up to Ms. Gracely, Ms. Carter, Public Works Department. It's been good. It's going to be a fun project that we're working on.
Well, I just want to thank you and all the staff that worked on that. We've already got a bunch of positive feedback from the neighbors. And I want to thank council, because all the council members have kind of jumped in on this and offer to help wherever they can to make this thing a big success. So I just reiterate that grand opening date would be, hopefully we'll have a big turnout for that.
Hopefully we'll too, but again, I just wanted to stress what a team effort it's been and is continuing to be. Public Works went down and took the whole creek pretty much and it's cleaned it up and made it look real good. I think you guys are gonna be proud when you, don't go by there till September 19th. I'm just saying, okay? Don't go by to September 19th. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Council, anything else for department heads? Thank you. All of our department representatives are excused after this item unless you're needed for a business item, and I don't believe any of you are. So thank you for being with us this evening. Moving on to business. These are items that are under consideration for advancement to the agenda of our next council business meeting. A passage tonight does not necessarily indicate one way or another how council will vote when it gets on the business agenda. 7A, proposal to impose impact fees. Councilmember O'Rear, would you summarize for us, please?
Real quick, Administrator Grace, we have someone in attendance that can help us with this.
Yes, sir. Naomi Reed from the Municipal Association is here. I thought if there were questions that came up during the discussion that I was unable to answer, she's a much better resource because she works with cities all across the state, and many of whom have impact fees, so she has some direct knowledge about that.
Ask a couple quick yes/no questions of her. That'll be okay? Yeah. Before I get into this. Have you had any yes/no question? Have you had any substantive discussions with anyone from the city or council before this meeting?
No.
All right.
Council?
Council or administration before this meeting?
Administrator Grace Lee and I discussed the nature of it.
Do you or your organization oppose impact fees?
No, we do not oppose impact fees. We support the impact fees depending on the municipality. If they believe that it's beneficial to their community, we support the education around impact fees.
Okay, thanks. And actually, I'm not going to talk a lot about this. This is something probably should have happened 15 to 20 years ago, but it's never too late. I think this is a proposal that will be extremely well received by the community because of not only stormwater issues, traffic issues, development issues. This would go a long way in addressing a lot of things. Nothing's going to happen quickly, and unfortunately, obviously, you don't know figures of what could come of this. But if in all of council, I put a couple of things on your desk for you. One was the article from GP McClear and Fountain Inn. I thought it was a very well balanced article. Everything has its ups and downs. Fountain Inn's a relatively similar town to us, and obviously very proximal. And they're moving forward with the study of this. And that's really what I'm asking tonight, is to get council's agreement to move forward with pursuing the imposition of impact fees per the state guidelines. And it takes time, and I understand that. It takes money, takes planning commission resources. But in the long run, I think this is something for the future of Simpsonville that will be extremely beneficial. The other piece of paper I gave you was from the town of Clinton. They recently imposed impact fees. I know we all have our differences, Clinton, and the mayor and I have talked about a couple of differences. I spoke to their administrator, Grace, and he said it's the best. His quote was, "It's the best thing they've ever done." I think we are in and Councilmember O'Rear will be able to speak to this better. I'll be able to. Everyone sees nationally, South Carolina is probably the most moved to state, especially as it comes to the impact on our base population. Maybe not by volume numbers. I think volume numbers were top 5, but by impact. And Greenville County is very darn near the top of the list for this state. So everything I've heard from county council is they're gonna be, come next year, gonna be looking into doing the same thing. So we will not be an island. We've got just south of us in Fountain Inn moving forward. Looks like Greenville County probably has the people in place that are gonna ask the same thing, and that will completely envelop us. So we will not be an island unto ourselves. From a business standpoint, we live in a capitalist country, and the business climate, I know the argument, I've heard the argument, if you impose a fee, whether it be $1 or $10,000, it gets passed down. That's possible. A lot of things are possible. That's not necessarily true. In a competitive environment, the same developers with the same set of rules, the same imposition, the same dollar figure, how competitive do they want to be? So they may pass some down, they may pass none down, they may absorb the cost. But in the long run, for the health of the city of Simpsonville, as we continue to grow and develop, I don't really see a whole lot of downside to this. So I would ask council to let's move forward with the state proceedings of how this is done and go through this and get down to the end of it. I think we need to get these imposed to the betterment of the city of Simpsonville.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Rear. Would you like to make a motion, please?
Yeah, I'd like to make Mayor and Council like to make a motion to accept the proposal to impose impact fees per the state guidelines.
Second.
Have a motion from Councilmember O'Rear with a second from Councilmember Root. Discussion? Councilmember Pinkerton.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I don't have any problem with the impact fees, but I just want to make sure what we're voting on, to be clear. Is this proposal we just put forth before council to agree on having impact fees, or are we proposing to have a study on it? Which comes first? I'm trying to get my head around, are we as council being asked to approve to go forward impact fees, or are we just asking for a study? I know both of those have to happen. So where are we in this process? I just want to be clear on
this. Is the very beginning. So it has to go through, a resolution has to come first, then the instructions to the planning commission, and jump in if I get it wrong. And the planning commission will have to do the studies, report to us, and if there's some gaps you'd like to fill in. It's the beginning of the process. And so we need to vote to move it forward so we can start building toward the substance of everything. Does that sound about right?
Well, do we not have to agree that we want to impose impact fees before we ask anybody, whether it's the planning department or whoever, to decide where best to spend those impact fees?
So I think I can answer that question, and then perhaps Ms. Reed could weigh in as well. So what has to happen first is if this passes committee tonight and goes to the business agenda, I would prepare a resolution for council to consider at the business meeting next month. And what that resolution would do is allocate funding to do the study. Of course, we passed a budget, we don't have funding, but we do have fund balance, and we didn't have funding for the bug track either. And you all paid for that through fund balance. So that's not a roadblock necessarily. You just have to consider whether or not you want to make that investment into the study that has to be done. State law requires not only a study for impact fees, but the capital improvement plan that would tie back to that. So you're allocating fees to do very specific things with the money once the impact fees, once it's come out of the planning commission and it comes to council for a vote, and that would be an ordinance at that point. There's a pretty substantial amount of time that would occur between those two. Where Fountain Inn right now is they have passed a resolution to do the study, and they are in the midst of their study right now. Just to give you an idea, I think they're paying $51,500 for the study. We're larger, so I'm estimating maybe a $75,000 expense to have, there are a handful of firms that do this, there are not very many. But that would be the first step, is that council would pass the resolution next month that would then allocate funding for the study and get the process started. It's not saying that you're going to impose impact fees. It's starting the process so you know what that looks like.
I guess my question is the study going to address where the funds are best used, or whether it's best to even have impact fees in the first place? Because I personally don't want to hand it over to the planning department to say, yeah, you don't need impact fees. I don't think that's where that needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be clear that whoever's doing the study is actually looking at where best we spend those monies.
They would be, because the study is not only a study of the impact fees themselves, but the capital improvement plan that would tie back to those fees. So you have to identify exactly where the money's being spent.
Right.
It can't be spent on existing resurfacing projects. It can't be spent to correct existing stormwater problems. It would do things like allocate funds for additional police officers or firefighters, allocate funds for new recreation facilities.
Ms. Campbell, can you, Ms. Reed, I always want to mix you up with Naomi
She
Campbell.
looks like Naomi Campbell. I
Yeah.
think she's very much.
Can you clarify, please, that it cannot go for recurring costs? Is that correct?
It's for new development. So if there's a developer that comes in and they, just to say, put in a new subdivision, the infrastructure to get the resources to that development is, you can assess impact.
That's a capital expense, though. That's not a recurring cost
Correct.
of
It's
funding
not.
police officers or firefighters or clerks. It's got to go to capital expenditures.
You can fund public safety, but as far as getting the capital for it, police cars, equipment, things like that.
Cars
salary
and
personnel.
fire trucks, but not personnel.
Correct.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think you answered my question. I just want to be clear what we're doing tonight, and then I'm sure it'll get more clear as we go forward. But that answered my question. Thank you.
Councilmember O'Rear.
No, here I understand.
No, okay, Councilmember.
Oh, okay. Good.
You both raise your hand at the same time. I just picked one.
All right. So this is a state mandate that we have to pay. We can't just look at neighboring cities like us and say, like this, like, here's what Clinton charges.
It has to be specific to Simpsonville.
And that study would show, to echo Councilmember Pinkerton, because I want to get clarity on this as well. $50,000, $70,000 is a lot of money to spend for a study. I want to make sure that we're getting kind of what we're paying for, that it will be as specific as, did you get a copy of this?
Mm-hmm.
Single family? Is it going to be something like this that we can see? Here's what we'll charge the developers.
At the end of the study, yes, that would be part of the study, which would then go into the ordinance that you all would pass to adopt the impact fees.
And we would.
And that's based on a specific capital improvement plan that is also part of the study.
So that study would be specific on, here's some options that you as a city has to use these funds for.
Correct.
Now,
Which can only be used to serve the new development that is paying the impact fees. So you can't go back and fix existing problems with impact fees. What you can do is say, if there's a 1,000 home subdivision, it's going to tax our police department where we replace a certain number of vehicles every year. It's going to say you probably need 2 new police cruisers to, because the call volume could potentially be higher. And then it would break that down to what that impact fee should be for police, for fire, for recreation. Those are typically the ones.
but it could in theory fix, I don't know how to word it, so I was worried, it could in theory fix some of our water problems if the new subdivisions are tying into current.
They're not though, because new subdivisions now have to provide their own retention and stormwater infrastructure. So they're already required to do that.
Okay, so, but for example, if a neighborhood is uphill, which we've seen, they have their own retention ponds, culverts, but that water still runs downhill to Poinsettia. That subdivision, yeah, they met the requirements, but their water problems are now somebody else's. So just because, in a way, it's still going to connect. I know it doesn't connect the way a pipe to a pipe, but what one subdivision's problem, their problems run downhill, and that's what we're seeing. That I just want to make sure that if we're going to approve this study, it's expensive, but if we're going to get valuable information on what it's doing to our water and sewage, rather than police car and a fire truck and a trash truck, I'm more concerned on, are we going to be able to fix some of our, I don't want to say existing problems, but making sure that we're not causing more problems on an already existing neighborhood. Does that make sense? Like, what? Am I making sense? Because I'm having trouble following my own logic. I've got a lot of things. I can only imagine what you guys are hearing, but
in a municipality that does not have impact fees, if that new development was to come in and there's existing issues, the council would have to allocate dollars anyway if they believe that part of their capital improvement plan is to address that issue. The impact fees, in a municipality where impact fees do exist, if the issues happen for that new development, those dollars have to be segregated and allocated to that new development. The municipality would not have to use existing general fund or capital improvement dollars to address both. They would then just have the impact fees for the new development and then existing funds get allocated for the whole.
So have you seen in your experience neighborhoods moving in that directly affect an older neighborhood that isn't going to benefit at all? In fact, it's going to cause them more problems, but yet this neighborhood, according to code and what they were supposed to do, they did, and they're another subdivision, maybe downhill, is.
The report is so expensive because there's a lot of technical expertise that contributes to the report, one of which being an engineering firm. And so I don't have that engineering background, but I was in a municipality and received those, the feedback from, our citizens that would say this new development caused this problem. But to say that in this particular situation that could happen, the study could reveal, depending on the firm that's selected, how new development can impact existing.
Okay. Does this come out of if we were to pass this 70,000, this come out of the general fund? It's not budgeted money. Where's this coming?
It would just come from fund balance in the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember O'Rear.
I think Ms. Reed hit the nail on the head with something I spoke to Administrator Gracely about, is when you collect impact fees and you obviously, and I'll be the first, and it's one of the first things that appealed to me about them is they are specific, and I like that because, and I think we're all very ethical people in here, but some people get a slush fund and they do what they want. That's impossible, and I like that. I like that they're targeted for certain things, but she hit the nail on the head with what we talked about. When you're funding something now out of the general fund, and you're no longer having to take those dollars because of the impact fees over here, whether they're $10 or $100,000, now you're able to use the general fund money for existing issues because the impact fee monies take care of the impact fee problems. And so, but the problem is you don't know how much that is, and I know we talked about that too, but that's kind of what Councilmember Root was, I think, asking about, and she hit the nail on the head because that's kind of a great appeal to it for me there too, is because I think the financial shape this city's in, everything I've seen is it's good, and so, with impact fees taking care of the new and growing development, then maybe our general fund money could be spent to something that's more existing at that point.
Councilmember O'Rear.
I have a question for Administrator Gracely concerning impact fees. I mean, there's a lot that can fall under that umbrella. In my way of thinking of it, it's we have fees already built into our process that developers have to incur that aren't necessarily titled impact fees, but they're there to address the cost to the city of disturbing the ground and putting things in, permits, things like that. Could you name any or all of those that are impact fees but not by title impact fees?
So our building permit does have built into it an administrative fee. It cannot exceed 1% of the building value. But if you get a huge project that's say a $3 or $4 million project, it's capped at $10,000, but those projects are going to pay that $10,000 administrative fee. It's part of the building permit process. And so each building permit that gets issued has that 1% administrative fee tied to it. And it's, like I said, it's based on the value of the permit. So a residential unit is not as large a value as, say, when we built, or when the developers built the new Chili's, for instance. That was at the time about a $2.5 million permit. So that was a $10,000 fee. That was an administrative fee that came to the city. And we account for that on the revenue side of the budget each year.
What do we appoint that fee for then? What would that $10,000, is there a fund that it goes into?
It just goes into the general fund, and basically that supports administrative staff who have to go through the permit review process, the Evolve software that we use now for permitting. When we issue permits, it's not just the revenue side that comes into the city coffers. There are expenses that go along with that. We pay a third-party building inspector. We have fire marshal who does his life safety review. So there's a planning staff, as you all know from the workshop last week. They're very involved in the permitting process. So it goes to pay for a portion of all of those staff hours that are included in bringing that project through the permitting process.
In your estimation, that 1% fee, does that usually cover everything that the city needs it to cover? Does it pay everything? Is there anything left over? Do we ever fall short?
To my knowledge, we may be one of the few municipalities that impose that administrative fee. We obviously have other permit fees as well that are, specific amounts based on the value of the job. The administrative fee is the only one that's not tied to a specific element of the review. So, it would be possible to, not in this budget year because, we have a balanced budget now, but as we're budgeting next year, if you all wanted to set aside that administrative fee for some other purpose or a specific purpose, you could do that. It's almost like robbing Peter to pay Paul, though. You're just moving the money to a specific use.
The reason I'm asking about whether we ever fall short or if there's excess, I'm trying to decide if, rather than spend $75,000 on a study, could we just increase our permit fee if that's what's needed going forward to cover anything that's missing? Are we missing anything? Are we spending all of that? Is everything covered in every project? Is there excess left over, or is there room to increase that?
Permit fees don't always tie back to an exact amount of what that permit process costs or what that particular building permit goes toward. It's in the general fund. It has a very general purpose. There's not a specific amount. So I think we're good on permit fees. I talked to planning staff about that 2 or 3 years ago. We were looking at surrounding municipalities to see if we needed to increase anywhere in our permit fees. We don't want to be way out in front of what permit fees are in surrounding municipalities. We want to be reasonable. But we could do a cursory review of those permit fees to make sure that we're keeping pace with what surrounding municipalities are charging for that process. Like I said, I think we already generate more from the bottom line because of that administrative fee. But as far as the actual line items, plumbing has a line item, electrical has a line item, and so forth. And those are tied back to the building official's time that is going to be dedicated to inspecting those specific trades.
So if we did decide instead to increase the administrative fee, or the permitting fee, or both, that would go to the general fund, and there are no state
restrictions.
regulations or restrictions on
Correct.
that. So we could address stormwater issues, we could address sewer, we could address whatever actually needs to be addressed without all the traffic.
Not a sewer, because that's a separate enterprise fund.
Okay.
You know, those fees are generated and maintained in a separate account. But yes, you could take permit fees and, you know, assign that revenue to, or, you know, everything comes out in the bottom line of revenues, and then you have your expenditures. Just like this year, we budgeted $250,000 for stormwater. We didn't identify exactly what that looked like. I know there's going to be some discussion about that later on tonight. But yes, I mean, if you wanted to bump that number up and say, you know, we generated last year $1.5 million in permit fees, we could look at apportioning some of that, or if there's a need to increase it, apportioning some of that for whatever you guys want to apportion it to. That's really what the budget is for you all to take the revenues that are generated and decide where you want to put your resources. And it's possible to do that.
And it would require a $75,000 study ahead of time.
That's something that can happen on the staff level. We would just contact other municipalities and request their fee schedule and see if ours is, you know, in line with what they're doing. And if not, you know, you all would have to approve any increase that we would recommend, but that is possible.
And one more question, either you or, is planning here? Yes, sorry, Charlotte's here. She might be able to answer. When I look at the map, I don't see a lot of areas that we could even have new development inside city limits. I mean, Mr. O'Rear mentioned a minute ago, this probably should have been done 15 years ago.
Sure.
And it should have, because that's when we had a lot of land to develop. At this point, our comprehensive plan pretty much has everything zoned where we want it. Not saying the zoning can't change, by request that can change, but it's claimed the property. There's just not a lot of real estate left for new developments. There's some, but not a lot. I just don't see us getting a whole lot of money from impact fees based on just the amount of real estate available. But what we could do, I think, is, you know, skip that process of spending $75,000 for engineers to tell us whether or not we should move forward. Because what if we decide not to? That just seems like a real waste. But I think if we evaluate other areas like this admin fee and the permit fees, we can probably cover the cost of whatever it is we're trying to address, which, you know, at this point, it would be roads, it would be stormwater issues, flooding issues, beautification. That's my thought.
Councilmember Hutchinson.
One of the requirements of this is for us to develop capital funds account. Is that something we would do before the next meeting, or would that be in the process after the?
That would be part of the study. We do have a CIP right now that we developed when we did the bond issues, for instance. We had to provide a capital improvement plan to show the bonding agencies what, you know, we had on the horizon. They want to make sure that we're not in dire need of everything, because then we're not a very good risk when it comes to loaning us money. So they do require that, and we have one. But this would be a capital improvement plan tied directly to the impact fees. So it would be something that we don't currently have.
To add to Councilmember Shea's point, with the administrative fee and permit fees, we have the latitude to apply that to stormwater issues or anything that we want to as far as city requirements go. But with the capital with the impact fee, we would not have that latitude. We'd only be able to apply those funds to new development in either residential or non-residential.
Only to the new development, yes.
And do we have a guesstimate or ballpark figures how much we have currently in funds with the administrative fees and the permit fees?
So we just started a new budget year, and I think Finance Director Furino is, but I can get that number for you all. I can tell you exactly what we generated in the most recent fiscal year, and then what we've done so far 2 months into this fiscal year in terms of permit fees. Those are, now I do want to warn you that those fluctuate, but impact fees would as well, because it's based on when there's a lot of development, you're going to generate more money, obviously. And we did have, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3, where that number was down considerably. We do the best we can in trying to determine what those revenues will be, but those are based on 5 prior years. It's based on what maybe is happening in the economy. We look at all those factors before we do our revenue projections, because what we don't want to do is over project revenue and then end up only generating half that, because then we've already got the expense side. And so we've done a pretty good job of keeping it relatively balanced. Or we've been in the black every year, which is where we want to be. But as you know, with this current budget, we did allocate another for the first time ever, specifically $250,000 to address stormwater. And then we put an additional $250,000 on top of what we were already putting in to resurfacing of existing roads. So we've used revenue to address some of the existing problems. And you could look at, adjusting permit fees or whatever to make that happen. I don't want to even say it out loud, but tax increase or those things too, or revenue sources. I would never recommend that unless we got in the position where we just simply couldn't, say we didn't have enough new growth to keep our current service level, and then you might have to look at a tax increase. But right now, that's not even on the horizon. In the time I've been here, we've never had to look at that. We did the public works fee to take sanitation back in-house, but we've not increased ad valorem taxes.
You mentioned that some other municipalities don't have the admin fees and so forth. Do you have any information on who does both the admin fees and the impact fees in surrounding municipalities? I know Fountain Inn is in process of studying this. Does Greenville City, Malden, Greer, do they have impact fees currently? And do they do something like we were doing with the admin fees as well?
I know 2 other municipalities at least have an administrative fee that's spelled out. A lot of municipalities have it baked into their permit fees itself. So when you do the study, I'd ask what portion of that is actually an administrative fee that's kind of baked into there. But I only have a list available of the municipalities that have imposed the impact fee, and I drilled into it to look at the population that's comparable to Simpsonville. So I have those figures, but I don't have the combination. That's something I can get back to you all.
Could we get a copy of that as soon as possible?
Yes.
And we could also, in the interim, have our planning staff look at what surrounding municipalities' permit fees are, just to make sure our fee schedule is comparable.
Councilmember O'Rear.
Yeah, I think some of the points being missed here. For one, when you're talking about, we'll just say it's a $10,000, like I said, the maximum's $10,000 fee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on any property, whether it's...
That's on any building permit.
Yeah, any building
It's capped at $10,000. It's 1% of the permit value,
Yeah, so
and it's capped at
at some
$10,000.
point, when you want to make up a number, like we need to do $25,000, $40,000, at what point does it not become punitive? The city saying, hey, to do business with us, this administrative fee is going to be $40,000. I mean, if that's the way we're going here, because,
I don't think we could
well, that's what I'm saying,
politically
we
do
can't.
that.
But we can't, but what we can do with impact fees is we can know exactly where the bodies are buried, where all of the funds are going. And I understand what y'all are talking about, flexibility of the funds. Flexibility of the funds comes with what I just described. When you impose impact fees, you're taking care of whatever the subsets were studied. And if it frees up funds that you have been using over here, then you can use that money for flexibility. I think we would be severely limiting ourselves by saying we're just going to magically raise the rate on a permit, because at some point it becomes punitive. I mean, I could see a developer, someone suing the city over, now, this is ridiculous. Well, I got to pay you $25,000, $30,000 just to get a permit. I think you're leaving a bucket of money, but I think the biggest problem in what people see in Simpsonville, myself included, is we all contribute every year through taxation for everything we've discussed tonight. All of us live in the city have. An impact fee also allows the developer to contribute in the quote-unquote impact he's or she are making on the city of Simpsonville, because really, no one's done this study, but how many months and months and months or years does it take for a piece of property in a development to get us back into the black financially from the impact we've absorbed from the development? If the development's 200 houses, we are having to put a lot of resources into that. As soon as we put the first resource into it, we are in the red financially. The impact fees help us stay in the black from the start. And that's what people see here. And that's what I see. I see that, I pay my taxes every year, but I'm already here. I live here. That's where I'm from. These guys come in, they build what they build, they sell what they sell. They don't contribute, with the exception of a permit fee and other administrative fees that we impose. They're not actually contributing to the impact they're causing. The flood of traffic on Harrison Bridge and Fairview that creates other issues with public works, police, fire. They're not contributing to that. And that's what these are talking about doing, is having them to contribute to the impact they are putting onto the city. Because let's not kid ourselves, they're here to make money. Just like the people that developed my neighborhood that are no longer even in business. They were there to make money. They tried to shove as many houses on one set of property as they could to make money. They are here to make money. We are here to steward the city of Simpsonville. They are not. So I think we are leaving a tremendous amount on the table, not to mention I think if this doesn't even get a second thought, there's going to be a lot of really upset people in the city of Simpsonville when the city has literally looked like they have taken the side of the people who are developing the city of Simpsonville. And I think it would be a tragic mistake not to at least get some numbers, get some figures. We're throwing 75,000 around like it's a known quantity. Don't know that.
Right. It could be less, it could be more.
And that is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. 7,500 is a lot of money to me. But you got to look at the big picture. Just saying I'm going to raise my administrative fee, that's not going to cover what we're talking about. Not even close. And impact fees are the only thing to even get us anywhere near close. I'm not saying it's going to be the greatest thing that ever happened, like Clinton said, but this should have been done, and it can still be done. And to Councilmember O'Shea's, impact fees hit everything, not just residences, any business, any industrial, anything. They're there for every morsel of real estate that hits the city of Simpsonville, any kind of development. I think we would miss out on a lot just to argue over the front end cost of the study. And believe me, I'm aware of what 75,000 is, but there's a lot down the road that the citizens of Simpsonville would probably be very happy about, knowing that the people that are developing their city are actually contributing to the same thing that we get to contribute to year in and year out. And talking about deference of taxes, that's a good way to do it. If they actually chip in on the front end, then maybe on the back end, we're not gonna be required to pay more taxes, because as they strain the infrastructure of this city, the next 10 to 15 years, eventually something's gonna have to be done. Who's gonna do it then? It's gonna be the taxpayers of Simpsonville. And we're sitting here today talking about, should we fund a study, when in 15 years, we're gonna look back and go, dang, what if we would actually done this instead of burdening the citizens of the city of Simpsonville, especially the ones that hadn't lived here as long as most of us have. And that's why I would mightily suggest that we keep pushing this forward and try to help our fellow citizens out. And I don't think the raising of administrative fees is going to even make a dent in that.
Councilmember Pinkerton.
Yeah, I have no problem with the impact fees. I think it's a good idea, but I think we might be kidding ourselves on one thing. It's fact, you have impact fees based on our potential growth. And based on the plan I saw the other day that we met, there are areas for expansion of the city. We wouldn't have a 2040 plan if it wasn't out there somewhere. But the impacts are the impacts of what the city's going to have based on the infrastructure needs of that area, whether it be more fire department, more policemen, more sewer, or trash collection. But I think we're kidding ourselves if we think we're going to have additional revenues to offset stormwater fees. I think we shouldn't even be talking about that. So the impact fees to me would be designated based on what those impacts are that we have to provide for an additional area that becomes a city. Now, I don't think that's going to be a cash cow. I think those are going to offset right into those impacts. So I'm for it. I think there is opportunity there. But I just think we're kidding ourselves to think that we're going to make more money on something like that in order to put it into another fund. I wouldn't even bring that up.
Council? Councilmember O'Rear.
It's one of the more negative aspects that I think needs to be discussed is that this will apply to all new construction equally. So if someone were to build a house, a second home on their property, that resident, even though they already live here, has to pay an impact fee on that. Any sort of there's no difference. Any sort of a remodel, you want to put a small apartment, whatever, a current resident is going to incur that fee. I think we all need to understand the things that impact fees cannot fund, and it's really the major things that we want and need, and that's the paving of roads, operational costs. They cannot fund, at least from what I'm looking at right now, new police officers or city staff. Impact fees must be attached to capital costs, another a one-time equipment fee. Projects that are not impacted by the property that's actually paying the fee. So we can't rob Peter to pay Paul and address something in another area. You cannot use impact fee funds to pay for something that's not impacted by the home paying the fee, and you can't replace a sewer. So you can't replace a sewer line in an existing neighborhood using funds collected through an impact fee for a sewer project in the new neighborhood. There's so many caveats to this, and it sounds great on the surface, and yes, let's do impact fees. We've been discussing this for a while. It's never made it to the agenda. I appreciate Councilmember O'Rear bringing it to the agenda, and now, I'm looking at this with fresh eyes and realizing exactly what we cannot do with impact fees, and trying to decide whether or not it's worth the cost of a study and developing a designated fund, and how it's going to impact the citizens that actually, is it going to improve our quality of life as existing residents? Mr. O'Rear made the point that, these developers come in and they build these things and it's all about money, and it absolutely is. That's what makes it tick. That's what makes the machine run. But everyone who owns that property, if it's resold and a private, individual buys it, they pay property tax on it. So we are getting tax money from those properties. If it's an apartment complex, then whoever owns the apartment complex is definitely paying property taxes, big ones. And so we do reap tax benefit after the building is built. And, those monies can be allocated to address some of the issues, but I'm kind of on the fence at the moment, but I'll definitely approve because I'd like a couple more weeks to look at this and get it on the business meeting agenda.
I have a couple of comments. I think a lot of my questions have been answered already, or things I was going to say have been said already by other council members. One thing I want to point out is 50,000, probably 50,000 plus to do a study that like Fountain Inn has decided to do. I think it probably almost certainly will be more, but I'm concerned about whether we can actually recoup that money based on in any kind of near-term way. If we impose impact fees because of all the capital improvement plans and the administration of where this money goes, and you have to set up special accounts to hold the money in, and the money has to be refunded if it's not spent within 3 years, and now you're adding administrative burden. You're probably going to have to consider adding administrative staff or deciding, somebody, city administrator decides something that we're going to stop doing so we can start doing this. I'm concerned that we may not be able to recoup that money in any kind of a near term. And I keep hearing, we keep talking about the money. I'm not clear why is it that we need the money. And I don't really believe that that's what the impetus of this is. I think the real concern is the growth, that we want to get a handle on the growth and maybe take some of that money that we would get from it and reinvest back in the community from the impact from that growth. But really the idea is that we want to put the brakes on growth. I circulated a map, if council will get that out and take a look at it. And I will point out that the top of the page is not north. This is an odd way to look at Malden, Simpsonville, and Fountain Inn. It's more kind of on an angle. But if you look at the map there, the kind of the cyan color is Malden. That's the city limits of Malden. The pinkish salmon color is the city limits of Simpsonville. And then the blue color is the city limits of Fountain Inn. All the orange is all of the already developed properties. These are all neighborhoods or industrial properties that are already developed and wouldn't be looking to do any further development or come into the city or do anything like that. I think this also real heavily illustrates that the impact on Simpsonville is that the huge pressure that we're getting is from outside the city. That's the big part of it. I mean, we're also getting it from inside the city or from things that are cozying up to us and annexing in. I'm not trying to make that be less than what that is. That's a real impact. But we are seeing huge impact from things that are out in the unincorporated areas of the county, and a huge part of that impact has already happened. Plus, if you look at the area that's above Simpsonville on the page, it's actually kind of northeast of us, why that is mostly white up there is that is the Scuffletown Rural Conservation District that has been imposed by the county that basically keeps that part of the county rural and will not allow development in that conservation district. And that almost touches just border for border with the city of Simpsonville. There's a little bit down between us and Malden that doesn't land in that conservation district. So that's restricted from development. I guess that's why I have concerns about would we be able to recoup the money from spending a lot of money on a study. And the other aspect of this too is I'm kind of not opposed to the impact fees as an idea, but I am concerned about us getting out on an island. All Fountain Inn is committed to do is to do the study. They have not voted to impose the impact fees. And that's the motion that's before us tonight, is to impose impact fees. And without an amendment, that would be what we would be moving to the business agenda. And Councilmember O'Rear mentioned that the feeling is that there will be support among county council with some new council members who are coming in for imposing impact fees out in the county. But that's pretty much looking in the crystal ball and trying to guess what they would do. And my concern is that if that were not to come to pass and we're out here on this island by ourselves with impact fees, all we're doing is driving more reason for there to be more orange on this map. That there will be less, if they have to pay impact fees, drives up the cost of homes that they're going to sell. They're going to really look to work with the county and figure out how to do it in the county. And right now, the only reason that we're attractive to anything for coming into the city is because we're a little bit easier to work with than the county is. So they might be willing to put up with that, more difficult to work with, to not have the impact fees. There's a difference between us and Fountain Inn, and a huge difference between us and Clinton, depending on where you are. It's Clinton. It's where the T is silent, but it's always sweet. But that Clinton has no surrounding communities around it. They are out there by themselves in Lawrence County. They don't have any other communities that are butting up against them. And they own the electric company and the water company. So in order for developers to get electricity and water in a reasonable way, they want to be inside the city. So the impact fees, they have leverage to encourage people to come, even though there is an impact fee. Fountain Inn is the same way. Fountain Inn gas is a huge lever that they have. And if you look at this map, everything that's over in Lawrence County that's undeveloped, the reason that they're cozying up to Fountain Inn is because they want that natural gas utility, of course, and the other benefits that come along with being in the city. Then one other thing that I am really concerned about in the discussion here tonight is Administrator Grace Lee said something a few minutes ago that she was afraid to say it out loud. The words tax increase. Fees are taxes. It's just another name for a tax. Imposing a fee is imposing a tax. And that's what gives me pause more than anything else. And just to repeat something that has already been said, it would be a tax that also applies to property inside the city. If it's redeveloped or it's undeveloped, this fee would apply there as well. So you're talking about imposing taxes on current residents of Simpsonville. And so I get nervous when we start talking about, let's raise administrative fees. We could just do that. Raising fees is raising taxes. And that's just my opinion of how I look at fees. The fee we put in to pay for bringing sanitation back in-house, I supported that. I was for that. But at the end of the day, it's tax. It is tax, and this would be a tax. And that gives me pause that we are so willing to impose a tax. And I do believe it will directly pass down from developers to the eventual buyers of properties because, as was said, it's about the money. They're not going to absorb that cost. It's just going to get passed along. So that's everything I wanted to say. Councilmember Rupert.
I have questions on procedure. So I think this merits a conversation, the business meeting. We deliberated quite a bit with really not many facts. We don't even know how much the study is at this point. The way that this is worded, would Councilmember O'Rear have to make an amendment to pass this along to discussion? Because as is, we don't even know what those impact fees would be, or a study to get the impact fees. So I'm confused what we're passing as is to the business meeting, or do we need to make an amendment if we want to discuss this at the next business meeting?
My motion was, and I can't say it verbatim, was to move forward in the state mandated process of eventually getting to the imposition of impact fees, but it's got to start. And that was my motion, was to move in the state mandated process of this particular topic, not to impose impact fees tonight, because that's not even possible. You can't even vote on that. It's not possible. So that was my motion, you know.
That's what I heard, was to start the process.
Yes.
So I don't.
So it's just
So we can move that to the business meeting.
have a
Because
resolution.
this is written very specifically that we're imposing impact fees, but yet we have no data to. Is your motion to deliberate further, to pay for a study?
Find out what a study costs.
Well, like Administrator Grayson said, if this passes the business meeting tonight, the motion I have on the table, she would write the resolution that would give us the ability to then start truly moving forward legally.
I mean, I'm happy to move it to the business meeting. I think it merits that, but I don't know how we need to pass it at the council to do that.
So I think we could use the interim period to get some questions answered. I know there was a question posed to Ms. Reed about who else does administrative fees and what do those look like. We could also have staff make sure that our building permit fees are comparable to surrounding areas. I can try to nail down a number for what the study would cost. The number that I threw out there is based on what I know Fountain Inn is paying. And, you know, they're a smaller community than we are. So
Where I am still confused. If we pass this, it looks like we've passed an impact fee.
Well,
The way this is worded, the way that we're going to vote on this, looks like we're passing an impact fee.
Well, that's not legal.
Careful that maybe we need to amend what we're voting on, please.
Actually, can I just ask, Councilmember, can you restate your motion? We can get it accurate.
Right, you know. So, Mayor and Council, I would like to propose that we move forward in the state mandated process towards the imposition of impact fees.
Second.
That's about what I said first.
No, it was just a restatement, so I'm gonna,
Yeah.
unless there's any objection, we'll just use that as how the motion was worded. So the proposal to move forward in the state mandated process to impose impact fees. So, okay. Councilmember Hutchins.
Okay, now if we pass this on to the next meeting, business meeting, as stated, we are authorizing a study at the next meeting when we vote. And we'll know how much that study is going to cost probably at that
we'll
point.
have I'll try to get a closer approximation rather than my supposition that based on the different size that it would be 75. I don't know. All I know is what Fountain Inn is paying. I can reach out to that firm and ask them, can you give me a ballpark figure of what that study's going to cost? But yes, what would happen at the business meeting if you pass that resolution is that it would authorize funding for that study, and that study would then take place. And then at the conclusion of that, there would be an ordinance for council to consider that would actually have a fee schedule.
So is the purpose of the study to determine what the impact fee would be per unit? Or is it a recommendation to us of whether or not we should impose an impact fee? Is there any element to that?
I don't think do you know if they go as far as making a recommendation or if they just provide what that fee structure should look like? I don't know. I've never done one.
I'm looking at the TUK report. I have several of these that I can forward so you can see what a feasibility impact study looks like. Theirs does not say, yes, do it, no, don't do it. It's really just the recoupment costs of new development.
So that study, the results of that study would then go to the planning commission.
Correct.
To offer a recommendation to council.
That's correct.
From them as to whether or not we should do the impact fee. Is that correct?
Yes, that along with the capital plan. They're typically done together, and the cost of the report reflects that.
Thank you.
Council? All right, if there's no further comments, let me make sure I get this right. Councilmember O'Rear, on the motion to move forward with the state mandated process for imposing impact fees, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed signify by saying no. That motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Item 7B, the proposal to allocate funding for stormwater study. Councilmember Pinkerton, would you summarize, please?
I'll do my best. As you know, and it's been mentioned a couple of times tonight, that we passed our budget this year, $250,000 in the Stormwater Capital Fund. And so what I propose after talking to Administrator Gracie is that perhaps the best way for us to know what our issues are and where to tackle them would be through a study. And I'm proposing, and we'll get into this more, $100,000 to engage in a qualified firm to perform that. In the interim, and I mentioned in a note that I passed along to everybody that, of course, Mullen and Fountain Inn did studies through grants. The grant, I believe, was about $500,000, and that was split between the two municipalities. They did it with, or at least Mullen did it with KCI. Since then, Administrator Gracie has passed on to me a number of things, even in the last few hours, to digest. So I'm going to lean on you a little bit for help here. Now, the $100,000 study, it may not be enough, and it would obviously be better if we had outside funds from grants to fund that as opposed to our funds. However, we could use this $100,000 in the event that we have no funds coming in, or in addition to funds that we may have. In other words, if they allocated $100,000 and we could use our $100,000, it may go a long ways to do a complete study of the issues we have, or maybe even a contingency. So I know there's probably a lot of questions, and there may be some concerns about the cost of this study. However, without doing some study and understanding where our impacts are, and I can point out a few, and everybody else can obviously point to problems where we have in the city, and I'm not suggesting that it needs to be one particular thing. But within the city limits, especially the older neighborhoods, we have stormwater problems that have been going on for years. And if we get at least a study that designates where those problems really are and potential costs and ways to fix them, if we fixed one, we'd be in better shape than we are today. So I know there's going to be some questions, but I will put it this way. I propose that City Council authorize from the Stormwater Capital Fund not to exceed $100,000 to engage into a qualified firm to perform a study on the existing stormwater issues and provide analysis and solution and detailed report.
A motion from Councilmember Pinkerton with a second from Councilmember Hutchings. Discussion? Councilmember Root.
Yeah, so there's no question the city has flooding problems. My concern is doing a study rather than just using our eyes. If we're going to use $100,000 to perform a study to tell us that we need $50 million to fix the city, I'm not sure what good that does, and we're probably looking at funds somewhere around that. I would say at least double our budget. So this is good, and I appreciate what we're trying to do. We've been scratching our heads for this for a while. What's the best way, how to tackle this problem? Where do we spend our money? How do we spend our money? I mean, I'd rather spend $100,000 fixing something. Like, what's the worst possible area right now? Where's that picture? Here's a picture. Here's a problem. I can see that. They're living it. Would $100,000 go to help them in some way? I don't know. This is why I don't like studies. I know studies have to be done. We're talking now, spending a lot of money on a study rather than, and this is what I want to ask too, would a cheaper study, would it cost less to do a study just in your neighborhood, council member? I mean, there's plenty of places around the city that don't have a flooding problem. Are we paying for that? Or would it be less expensive to hire a firm to say, this is where we want you to do the study, this is our water problems, what can we do? And that's a lot less. That would be something that would maybe be worth exploring. I don't know. We've asked several times, how much are we looking at? The city definitely has a problem. There's a couple of neighborhoods involved. Can anyone answer that question? Would a firm, A, have we talked to a firm about this? B, would it be less expensive to do certain areas of the city where they're not doing a full city study? Is that even on the table?
So my understanding, having spoken with Malden and Fountain Inn about the study that they're doing, which is primarily funded through a grant, there is a 25% match requirement. So the firm that's doing those studies for them are looking at basins, where you have the impact of moving water that then, rises as rainfall events happen, particularly heavy stormwater events. And so I think it would center around those basins rather than specific neighborhoods. Now, it would probably narrow down to a couple of neighborhoods based on where the heaviest flow is through those creeks. Rocky Creek, for instance, is a big problem. And then, Andy might have to help me. Durbin Creek is a big problem. And so I think the study would likely need to focus on those specific areas anyway, because that would address the areas that are worse off. I don't know that $100,000 is enough to get to the meat of what we need to know, which is why I reached out to Malden and Fountain Inn and shared information with Councilmember Pinkerton about this grant program and said, present it how you want to, and council can do what they want to with it, but perhaps we should try for outside funding sources to pay for the bulk of the study, and then we would use this money as a match to that. And it would depend on the total amount of the grant award as to how much we would, like I said, it's 25%. So if they fund a $300,000 study, it's going to cost us $75,000.
But will they do specific studies? Is kind of what I wanted to see. Would they require us to do, no, we're going to look at your entire city?
No, they would work at our direction. And so I think if we say we know that the worst areas are Durbin Creek and Rocky Creek, then they would focus on the neighborhoods in those two basins.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Pinkerton.
I appreciate your comments, and I don't disagree with you. There are some concerns I actually have on this as well, but one of the things that's come up in council, I refer back to the meeting on June 27th of 2023, which I was here on. Council said that it was going to be difficult and expensive. But if we don't know what that expense actually it is, $100,000 won't hardly fix anything. Okay, nor will $250,000. When we proposed that $250,000, that's like a drop in the bucket, so to speak. But part of what I like to see out of a study is, here's one of your existing problems, and here's how much it will cost. Now, whether it costs $50 million, I don't know. But unless we know the direction we need to go in as from a budget standpoint, all we're ever saying is it's just too expensive to do. And I can't live with that. I think we need to at least get to a point where in the future, if we need that much money and we need to protect our citizens and our growth that goes along with it, I think it's warranted to at least entertain a study. I prefer that we use this out of some other funding source as opposed to our $100,000, but there's $250,000 sitting there that I don't know what in the world anybody else would propose to do with it at this point, other than finding out what our issues are and how much it'll cost. So again, it's up to council. I'll go along with your decisions, but I would like to see us at least get engaged into some study as to what our problems actually are and how much it's going to cost. I can't guess at it, neither can anybody in here.
Councilmember Hutchins.
We had this discussion a couple of years ago, I think, with our city engineer, and one thing that he pointed out was that this is a system-wide problem. It's not something that you can really look at as being a Simpsonville issue or Malden issue or Fountain issue. The water flows north to south, and you have to look at the whole system in order to figure out how to fix some of these problems. The thing that he suggested at that time was a study like this. Fortunately, we have now a study done in Malden and Fountain Inn, so we've got a good part of that area covered. I don't know how we got looked over in that particular go around, but for some reason we didn't get included in that. I don't know. Were we asked to participate?
Our city attorney at the time said stormwater is the third rail, don't touch it, and so council didn't. Yeah.
All right.
But I think the thought process on council has evolved since then. That, you know, we can't just keep saying, as Councilmember Pinkerton said, we can't just keep saying, yeah, we know there's a problem, and then not trying to figure out a way to address it.
Well, if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, I think Malden and Fountain Inn each spent about $250,000, which was covered by grant money for the most part.
In addition to their local match required, yes.
So hopefully we can get some kind of results like that as well if we were to go forward with this. And I agree with Councilmember Pinkerton. I don't think $100,000 will be enough to cover the study based on what they've done. But I think in order to look at, and I looked at the studies that have already been done, and they do drill down to specific areas in the city and neighborhoods and so forth. So it's not just like a overall encompassing thing. It's pretty detailed. So I'm in favor of looking at moving forward with the study with the caveat that I don't think $100,000 will cover it. So I think we need to look at some ways to seek funding if we're going to do this in addition to or instead of coming out of our own capital funds. And that's all I have on right now.
Councilmember Rushay.
I'm with Councilmember Hutchins. I'd rather not spend the money, but we have to spend the money. And it's a shame because it's, you know, the red tape bureaucracy of government. We've got to spend monies to find out how much money we need to spend. And that's the way it runs. But without doing that, we would just be throwing money where we can observe every time it rains. Well, let's do that. And we could cause a problem in another area by stopping the water flowing here or purchasing that piece of property and putting in a retention pond will affect some. That's the problem with stormwater. Once you start, and that's the reason that the former city attorney said don't go there, because if you fix Lewis's problem, you're going to give Bob a problem further downstream, or you're going to flood Main Street by, you know, doing this. So that's why stormwater is huge, and there are no easy answers. But I agree that it's nice Fountain Inn and Malden have some answers. We seem to be the missing piece of the puzzle, and I think we need to jump on it sooner rather than later. So I'm all for spending the money that needs to be spent to find out how we address it, and we do it the right way, and we don't waste taxpayer dollars just buying here and stopping water there. Something I had questioned a year ago when they had terrible floods, I had talked to Administrator Gracely about FEMA studies, because I know that FEMA comes in and does studies from time to time and tells you, you know, where your floodplain areas are. I don't know how often they do that, how soon another one could be done in some of our problem areas. The caveat to that is that you could literally make someone's home worthless with a new FEMA study, because if they bump that up into, you know, a high-risk floodplain now, nobody's going to buy that house. They're also going to increase, your insurance is going to be increased based on that FEMA study. So, you know, that could have another effect that we don't necessarily want. Putting that out there because, like I say, it's a complicated issue, and I think we just need to go about it the right way. And to channel former Councilmember Houlihan, we need data. We need data. We need numbers. We need to know exactly where the problems are. And I think that a good study would give us that data. I agree with Mr. Hutchings. There's no way 100,000 is going to touch it because engineers are expensive, especially with an issue like this. But once we have the study and we know for sure, then we can do something about the problem rather than just, you know, throw in something and hoping that it sticks. Something else I had a question about. The grants. How soon can we apply for a grant like Malden and Fountain?
So this particular grant program that I shared with Councilmember Pinkerton is the same grant source that Malden and Fountain used. It's the acronym for it is BRIC, B-R-I-C. It is through the Emergency Management Division of the state. They administer those grant resources for FEMA. So the money comes from FEMA on the national level to the state, who actually would accept applications and administer the grant.
And we put in 25%, is that?
It has a 25% match requirement, yes.
And where would that funding come from in our budget?
Well, what I'm hearing tonight is that I think the will of council is to allocate some resources toward seeing how pervasive the problem is and what some solutions might be. And so if you do allocate this money for a study, you know, and give me some guidance as to, do you want me to go ahead and see what $100,000 gets us? Do you want me to apply for the grant and see if we can get that and then put those resources toward the match requirement? So I would just need a little direction as far as where do you want me to go next for that. The rural infrastructure administration down, we get a lot of sewer funding from them. They also will fund stormwater projects. And so there are grant funding sources once we have a specific project in mind. They would also fund a study, but I think the amounts that they allocate for studies are pretty small amounts of money. So I'd like to pursue this BRIC application. We did last week put in a notice of interest, which is step one for that. It basically just alerts them that they need to provide us, when the application cycle opens, assistance to help us with that application. And so I think, we've started that process. We've not obligated the city to anything, so it's really whatever council wants to do as far as that.
I'm all for all the free money we can possibly get our hands on, of course. But I'm willing to spend what Mr. Councilmember Pinkerton has stated as well, and more if needed, because this affects the entire city. I've heard, well, what about houses that don't have flooding? Well, if you fix the ones that do, your house might be next. We're kind of having that experience in my neighborhood when the creek overflows. We've never had flooding. I bought on the high side of the street. I learned that when I was young. I bought on the high side of the street. Creek is behind, but there's another one. Anyway, as people are moving in and they're trying to save their own homes, it's forcing water other places. So, we need a good study.
Councilmember O'Rear.
Yeah, I first looked at this, I was like, that's a lot of money. But then I think of things like life experiences. Took my first job out of college, and part of it was building displays with product. And I learned real fast, you don't start building it until you figured out how you're going to build it. It took me about twice, and so I figured that out pretty quick. I think with the grant money that we could get, and should get, it sounds like, I think this would be a very wise investment, because you can't fix a problem if you don't know where it is. I mean, we can all go see a home and see flooding. We can see that driving around. But I'm assuming the depth of this study would be something like, here are all your problems, here's what it would probably take to fix it. And the thing about a study now, and the first thing I'll say too is I truly appreciate all the dialogue from this council. In coming to meetings in the past years, it outside of one huge issue, there wasn't a whole lot. So I really appreciate all the dialogue because I learned a lot this way. But I just think this, if you don't do it now, the problems don't get better, they get worse. You're lucky if they stay status quo. So if you do the study now and you find out where the issues are, even if you don't move forward with fixing something tomorrow, that problem's still going to be there. It doesn't repair itself. So it's something that the city, and I guess Malden and Fountainhead have done. You know where your issues are, and you can pick them off financially at that point where the feasibility would be from a budget standpoint. That's when you order things in importance. What's the biggest problem, and try to tackle it from there. And I think, at some point, to Councilmember Pinkerton's point, $100,000 is a tremendous amount of money to a person like me, but in the long run, it's going to go a lot farther and probably save this city a lot more money just by knowing what they need to do before they try to go do it. So I'll be in favor of this.
Councilman Hutchins.
I just want to say this while we're talking about money. A while back, we had a flood that took out a bridge and culvert, and I think it cost somewhere close to $500,000 to put those back in working order. So this study could help us to possibly identify some potential problems like that before they happen and save money in the long run.
Council? I have just a couple of quick questions. When did Malden and Fountainhead start their process on the FEMA study? If I remember correctly, it was about 3 years ago?
Yes.
And do we have any temperature gauge on how far along that study is before it's coming to completion?
I think they're rounding the corner now. I mean, the studies are still, at least for Malden, I know they're still in process, but they're getting close to the end of that.
I'm just curious about how long it takes to complete one, and I'd like to see a completed one. I know we can look at other ones from other places. It sounds like at least a couple council members have. So I'd like to see what that final product looks like. It sounds like we can go the FEMA route, and I think it's a good thought process in terms of if we're saying 50 million, 100 million, 500 million, we're just pulling numbers out of thin air. So having concrete answers, is possibly a worthwhile thing. I would like to. We can do it tonight, or we can do it at the business meeting. But I would like for Councilmember Pinkerton to consider amending the motion to make it to direct the city administrator to pursue the FEMA grant using up to $100,000. I think that would probably be enough, because if it was $550,000 for both Fountainhead and Malden, it might be $400,000 by now for us, but at least I think that might be in the right level. If we need more, we can come back and add more to it. But in the long term, I think that possibly it's a good idea to get concrete answers so that we're not just pulling information out of thin air. So that's all my comments. Any further comments from council? All right, on the motion to allocate funding and authorize funds from the Stormwater Capital Fund not to exceed $100,000 to engage a qualified firm to perform a study of Simpsonville's existing stormwater issues and provide analysis and solutions in a detailed report. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
I have a point of order. Councilmember Roche.
The only thing on the agenda is a proposal to allocate funding for stormwater study. What you're reading from is the memo that was attached.
Actually, it was the motion. I think it's pretty close to the motion that Councilmember Pinkerton made.
I just read it right off the list.
Yeah.
So is it the one on the agenda, or have we amended it to be what was in?
The agenda item is just an abbreviated way of saying what the longer version that Councilmember Pinkerton stated.
That was his original motion. We're fairly close to it, was to and I tried to catch it as you said it the first time around, and I think that the ruling is that is acceptable. So, further discussion on that?
I just want to say that would actually, the way it's written on the agenda would actually not put a cap on it and may give more leeway for fact-finding. Proposal to allocate funding for stormwater study is, I mean, we all know what a stormwater study is.
Yeah, but that's not the motion the council member made. The rule that's the motion that's in place. If you are opposed to that motion, you can vote against it.
Not opposed, just want to make sure that they match, because what we put out for the public before the meeting needs to be, on the agenda as it is going to be proposed.
As presiding officer, I rule that's incorrect, as long as it generally covers the topic, and then the motion is made for the public to hear during the meeting. That is acceptable.
Point of order.
Councilmember Hutchins.
Could we ask Councilmember Pinkerton to restate the motion?
Be happy to.
We can. Councilmember Pinkerton, if you will restate the motion, and that will be what we vote on. Councilmember Pinkerton.
Find it. Oh, there it is, right in front of me. I propose that the City Council authorize funds from the Stormwater Capital Fund not to exceed $100,000 to engage in a qualified firm to perform a study on Simpsonville's existing stormwater issues and provide analysis and solutions in a detailed report.
All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed signify by saying no. That motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Council, I move for a 5-minute recess. This is not an item that has discussion, so all those in favor of a recess signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed signify by saying no. We are now in recess for 5 minutes. Council is reconvened. Item 7C, proposal for South Carolina Office of Resiliency Stormwater Loans and Buyouts. I will summarize this item. This is a proposal to authorize a flooding buyout program for the city of Simpsonville that allocate the full amount available of the budgeted stormwater dollars to apply towards eligible homeowners who can provide evidence of flood damage to their primary dwelling. I included, along with the proposed agenda item, a sample program. I want to emphasize that this is a sample program. This would not be something that I'm proposing as the finalized program, but a program that would be a framework that we could jump off from if council is interested in pursuing this item. And the primary things that are part of this is that the eligibility criteria would necessitate that this is your primary dwelling that you are living in. So it wouldn't go towards, I think it's for some reason very common for people to park their riding lawnmowers down by the creek. I'm sorry, we're not going to replace your riding lawnmower when the creek gets it. This has to be damage to your home that you are living in. There would be an application process and review with an independent appraisal. We would arrange for a certified appraiser to pay. The idea would be to pay the fair market value of the property pre-damage. Funding for this would come from the city, a little bit of budgeted funds from the city, but also include securing funding through the state and federal sources such as SCOR and FEMA grants. The idea would be that if we were to buy out a property and there was not enough money left over to buy out another property, they would just have to wait until we have funding in the next budget year. Once we spend the money is spent, and we wouldn't have additional available money. So we can't fix all of the problems at once. Ultimately, if we do this program, the idea would be that this would be turned into a park or a natural area or a stormwater catchment basin. The existing structures on the property would be demolished. I think that based on the previous item that we discussed, if we were to approve this program and go forward with a buyout, My recommendation would be to not do anything except demolition of the existing structures until we have the results of any full study that was available to determine what the right thing to do is. I think based on Councilmember O'Shea's concerns, are we impacting things downstream? We at least know that if we demo the buildings, we wouldn't be making things worse downstream or upstream. It would just continue to be the way it is at the moment until we get more concrete answers about the appropriate way to manage the property. So that's a basic summary. So council, I move to propose a resolution for moving forward with a program for the South Carolina Office of Resiliency, Stormwater Loans and Buyouts.
Second.
A motion from the mayor with a second from Councilmember O'Shea. Discussion? Councilmember Root.
Yeah, just a couple questions. Does this go to damage, if their fence is damaged or their AC is damaged, they wouldn't necessarily be asking for a complete home buyout if floodwater damages something on their property? Does this resolution go toward that, or are you specifically just referring to home buyouts?
Just home buyout. If it's a damage to your fence, or the fact that you had a lot of mud in your backyard, or the neighbor's garden shed got washed into your yard, that doesn't apply to that. This is only for damage to your primary dwelling structure.
And we've talked about the state and federal programs. Do you know, or do we have a clue how much percentage of the monies from the city versus the state and federal would be going to this program?
Administrator Gracely, do you have a better handle on that?
So, Director West and I have met with someone from the State Office of Resilience, and we've taken that individual around to what we believe are the most problematic areas where homeowners are directly impacted by floodwaters. They've looked around. We were hopeful that they would manage the program for us if council were willing to move forward with this. They don't want their staff to do it, so I've been in conversation with the Greenville County Redevelopment Authority, who administers our community development block grant program, to ask if they would manage the buyout program for us so that the city is not directly involved in that process. It removes us a little bit from that. And the criteria would be the same. It has to be your primary residence. It has to have incurred damage on, I think, 2 occasions, and you would have to have documented proof of that. And then we would be able to use the Community Development Block Grant Program to do the demolition. They just can't use it for the buyout unless it directly impacts a person of low and moderate income. And stormwater doesn't discriminate on income. It goes where it goes. So the SCOR loan would be to capitalize the program for the buyouts. The redevelopment authority would then administer the program until the funds are exhausted, and then council would have to determine, do you want to apply for another loan to continue the program, or do you feel like the city's done enough in that first phase? That would be up to council. The loan amount would be $1 million. It's based on prime rate at the time that the loan is provided to the city. They're very low rates. They calculated it for me. Based on the current prime lending rate, it would be about a 3% loan. Now, I said loan because that's all they're willing to do with the buyout programs as of now. They did mention that perhaps part of that could be converted to a grant later on in the program, but initially it would be a loan application. I have been unable to find grants so far that would fund a buyout program. So our option is to use the Office of Resiliency for the loan that the city would then be responsible for, but that would provide the capital to do the buyouts, because if we're spending $100,000 on a study or a match for, a citywide study, $150,000, even the full $250 is not enough to do a buyout, most likely. You've got the administrative task of having the appraisal done, among other things, and then you've got to actually pay for the buyout. You've got to compensate the homeowner to sell the property to the city.
A couple more questions. That was a complicated answer. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you answered it, but I guess it's hard. I guess I asked you a tough question because are you insinuating that the little bit of state and federal money that we do get, we're going to use the difference of that, which maybe be a majority, is going to be city funds?
We would not get, there is not a grant program that would fund this.
Correct, but the monies that we get back from state and federal, which differ each year, are we going to redirect those monies, which typically might go to a street, to help pay for if we were to buy someone out and save those monies instead of maybe perhaps fixing streets or things that we do?
I'm not quite sure what state and federal money you're referring to.
The $1 million that we got back from state that we fixed the street, we asked for 10, we got 1.
Oh, that was for the that was a specific allocation for the downtown revitalization project.
Yes.
We cannot,
can we allocate that money toward this program?
No, because when I asked for that earmark, it was specifically for the downtown revitalization.
But in the future?
We can always ask for an allocation. Whether or not they would grant it for this purpose, I don't know.
Okay.
But each budget year, we can certainly ask our representative and our senator to provide some sort of earmark for this. I don't know that they would do it for this program, simply because then everybody would be asking for the same.
Okay.
Because I think these problems exist, outside of jurisdictional boundaries. They're everywhere.
Okay. I'll ask you my next question. It's a twofold question. Maybe I'm helping some council members out that we're going to ask this. Who ultimately will decide which homes are being purchased first? Is that a council decision? Would that be a staff decision?
That would be a redevelopment authority decision based on the applications they receive.
Would that come to council?
And it would be a first come, first served if they meet the criteria. Basically, if you're first in and you meet the criteria, then they would start that process with you.
See, I would disagree with that I would say that the homes that were affected the most should be the front of the line.
And I would imagine the ones that are affected the most would be at the front of the line.
You would think so. You would think, but I just want to be clear that they should probably have precedent.
And we can set up whatever parameters council wants to establish for that. I think the mayor gave an overview of what the guidelines could be. You could certainly say, provide evidence that you're impacted by every storm event. And that could show who is in the most dire situation. That's just an example.
My last question is the home value. How are we going to value these homes if they're in a flood zone? They're not able to sell to somebody else. I know Councilmember O'Rear might even be able to help answer this question, but how are we going to value that home and how we're going to pay out that person fairly to find another home, but also fair for the city as well?
It would be done by a licensed appraisal. There would be a real estate appraiser that would do the appraisal of the property, and that would constitute the buyout amount.
Would that appraiser be aware of why they're appraising the property?
If they're working directly for the redevelopment authority through the process, then they may be. So I can't say for sure that they would or they wouldn't.
I'd like to ask a question to Ms. Bradshaw very briefly. Can I ask a question?
That's the procedure.
She's in line.
Yeah, I'll allow it.
Is that okay? Ms. Bradshaw, when was this picture taken and how often has this happened since you've been there in 2 years?
So 10 times.
10 times?
Yeah. Those are probably 3 different instances.
What's the most recent that you got this much water?
July.
Okay, all right. Thank you for sharing. I'm done. Thank you.
Before you go, Ms. Bradshaw, there's another question for you.
You mentioned April 2022. Is that when you purchased the home?
Correct.
Okay. Did the sellers that you bought it from not disclose the condition?
They did not.
Have you sought remedy through that process?
I have no funds for a lawyer to do that.
Well, I want to offer real estate advice here, but there's ways that you can go through the state for that. The
Yeah.
agent that represented you, the agent that represented them.
Yeah, so I didn't want to do that because this is a long-standing issue and I want to get it fixed for all the people around us. And like, our home being on this land now, with the amount of water that comes there, is just inappropriate for a structure to be there now. So I didn't want to just give it back to somebody who was shady in the first place and then have them not do anything with the home. And we can't sell the home anyways, so we're kind of dead in the water here.
Thank you.
Keep going, Councilmember O'Shea.
I think with this proposal, the eligibility criteria, I mentioned that specifically because I would like to see all other methods exhausted before the city jumps in to buy a worthless property. Because, that real estate law dictates in South Carolina anyway that a seller's disclosure has to be provided. And it's supposed to be honest. April 2022, I know of storms before then that flooded this same area. So it was likely a known problem. And that would be one way of getting remedy. When buyers buy homes, there's also, insurance involved and researching of the title, and there's extra work that goes in. There's a lot of people involved in a property transaction. So under the documented damage, let's see, where did you put it? Whatever's reviewed by the city official, I think, like I say, everything that could be exhausted is exhausted. So not just insurance claims, but denial from the insurance company. If they say, no, we're not going to repair it again, or no, we're not going to buy it from you, or I'd like to see that hurdle jumped. I just want to make sure that city's really thorough with everything that could be done before we jump in and buy this. I see a little problem with the appraisal issue too, because I don't know how the Office of Resiliency works, but normal appraisal would be based on the condition at the time the appraiser steps over the threshold. And so there definitely would get less based on that. I don't think an appraiser can go retroactive and say, well, 2 years ago or whenever before this place ever flooded, it would have been worth. That's not how the appraisal works. Anyway, I see some issues that need to be addressed and spelled out, and I like all this general criteria that Mayor Shewmaker has provided. But I'm wondering if this wouldn't need to be turned into an actual ordinance and actually have the right legal wording to protect the city and make sure that every house is treated fairly and every option exhausted before we just jump in and start buying houses. That's all.
Councilmember Pinkerton.
Yeah, first, I appreciate all the efforts to find funding to take care of our problems, but it is a complicated issue, this one. And I'm probably more familiar with it on council than anybody, at least as in regard to 206 South Almond. It's only 2 houses down from me, I've seen it. But some questions. That's the property we're really discussing to begin with, because there's no particular property mentioned in this. And from what I understand, Mayor Shewmaker, this is a framework and it's not necessarily what we're seeing going forward. But it does say, allocate full amount of the budgeted stormwater dollars to this program on an ongoing basis. So the stormwater dollars that we allocate, it goes into the budget. So let's say we borrow this $1 million. So we got to pay that back. And it would have to come out of funds that we allocate to the general fund under the stormwater, well, at least the way it's written here. So this council won't last forever, and $1 million won't get paid off in 3 years. But what happens if council does not approve any more stormwater money? in the coming years?
I think that's probably kind of a legal question for an attorney, but I think, if we get a loan.
Yeah, we're obligated to pay the loan.
Yeah, we're obligated to pay the loan, but if council decided to no longer fund it, that'd be the end of the program.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this, no matter where you write it down, it's coming out of general funds to pay off the loan. Okay? You could just say, we're gonna pay the loan regardless of where it's funded from, correct? If you're being specific about a particular budget item and then you decide you still gotta pay the loan, I guess is where I'm going at. Therein lies the issue maybe for me, and something that certainly needs to be considered, because even back on the June 27th meeting of 2023, council noted that, of course, we don't want to do tax increases in the city, and we don't want to redistribute funds from the fire department to the police department. But in essence, we're using tax dollars that the citizens are paying into the system on to pay off a loan for somebody, or to pay off their house, pay off a loan that we're borrowing. And maybe that's a good thing to do to solve a problem, but I know that particular problem won't go away by buying a house. I think that there's more to it than that. Hence the $1 million, because obviously if we're looking at that particular property, there's going to be a lot more engineering issues involved in whether you want to retain all that water somehow. That's a problem in itself to me, just knowing from an engineering standpoint. In fact, that there's a sewer line that runs under there as well, which is an easement. I don't know if you can build a retaining pond over a sewer easement. And I know that if you don't do anything, that it affects the next houses down quite substantially, where they can't even get in and out of their driveway. So I know what the problem is. I'm very sympathetic to it. But I'm just concerned that at least if we move forward on this, that we are very specific on making sure how we go forward. One of the reasons why I put forth the previous proposal was to study these sort of things, to see that something that we could take care of. And again, I defer back to previous meetings where council said it's just too expensive. Well, we don't know what that cost is really. I mean, we're actually shooting in the dark a little bit here on this buyout, a little bit. We don't know the study of what it's actually going to be buy the house out, or how it's going to cost to do a retention pond, or what those effects are, or anything. I mean, the maintenance of that in itself will go back to the city. That's part of the cost. It says it right here that you have to maintain it over the years. That means cutting the grass or making sure we don't have any problems with it. And you got neighbors that live right next door to them. I don't know what it affects on them. So, although I have no problem, however it's worded, that we have further discussion on this, but I am a little bit concerned that we do the right thing. And I'm hopefully that this gets solved for the benefit of the people that lives there. But I think there's more to it than just a proposal that says, here, give us your application and we'll borrow the money and buy you out. I think there's a lot more downstream to this than meets the eye, at least in this proposal. My comment.
Councilmember Williams.
So if we were to combine kind of this and then the report for the stormwater, this may not have to be something we would have to continue to do long term. This could be something we could do for a short period of time to help the people that are impacted at that level now, because it would take quite a while for a study for the stormwater to come through, for those to get all the details on that, and then to have things that were, once we have all the details of how to fix everything, what needs to be done, once that all gets through, which would take quite a while, this may not even be something that would be necessary anymore, but it would help the people in the meantime who are in situations where at the point where willing to have their house, you know, be bought out because there's nothing they can do anymore. And what, did you say that we would be able to, Ms. Gracely, did you say that we would be able to put the stipulations in for the detail for the applications that came in, correct?
Yes, council could decide exactly what the parameters are. I think Mayor Shewmaker has offered a first attempt at that, but it could certainly be drilled down a bit more.
And with like the detail that, you know, Ms. Roche was saying, or Mr. Pinkerton, those could all kind of be added into there, right? As well?
Yes.
I guess.
Yes. I know that when we had a couple of major stormwater events last year, we had a lot of people fill the chambers, and there were some who spoke. I remember specifically a couple of people who lived in Westwood, that lived on Yellowwood, that had issues. Now, I don't know that their homes were as impacted. They had issues with fencing and air conditioning units and things like that. We didn't get quite as far with them. But we could certainly put the parameters on there and say, you know, if your foundation is being undermined to the point that you're concerned about your home collapsing, you know, and causing not only damage to the property, but a risk for the people occupying the home, you could put whatever parameters you want on there. I would say we could at least look at Greenville County. Now, they are only doing buyouts in floodplains. But they have parameters for a program, and we could rely on them to share some of that information with us on how they do it, and that might give us a little more guidance on how we would do it. You know, there's nothing we can do if we don't have the capital to do it. So, you know, the start would be for council to determine, do you want to instruct me to apply for the loan? If that's the direction council wants to go, that would be a first step. And in the interim, while we're waiting on that, we could establish the parameters for the buyout. You know, have you exhausted all your other options? As Ms. Councilmember Roche said, you know, what are those circumstances, you know, upon which you acquired the real estate? How long have you been there? Do you still have some recourse from other places? All of that could be factored in to the buyout program.
Councilmember Hutchings?
I'm very familiar with this problem in my ward, and the home you mentioned, I stood out in the front yard of that property when that storm came through, and that homeowner was I believe several feet of water had gone into the first floor of their home and had to evacuate the home. So, and that was not the first time. But then again, there was a fence on the property which acted as a dam, basically to back the water up to that property. And I think what we're going to see the magnitude of this problem is when we take out one, it's going to, that thing we mentioned earlier, is going to affect the next one downstream. So we're going to have to think about how many of these homes we might be looking at. And I'm concerned a little bit about the evaluation or of the applications, as to prioritizing which properties are bought out and so forth, and how much input we would have as a council into those decisions if this were to go forward. Another thing to think about is we just, I believe we just passed on a possible allocation of $100,000 or more out of the stormwater fund to do the study. The study, it would at some point in time probably tell us what we needed to do in these situations more so than we know right now as far as the impact that removing one property would do. As the mayor mentioned, right now we're only talking about doing demolition, so the flooding issue could still be there if you just move it down to the next property. So I like the idea of this. In fact, the homeowner that I talked with was in a very bad place that night. I mean, she was just basically frantic, and had asked me if there was anything we could do as a city like this. And of course, we didn't have anything at that point. And I would have loved to say, yeah, we can do that. We can help you out. But again, and Councilmember O'Shea brought this up. She indicated that she bought that property with that problem already being there. And I don't know that the seller disclosed that to her as well. So is that not required of a seller to give that kind of information? So I think in those situations, as Councilmember O'Shea said, I think the first step would be to seek legal methods of making it right, because the seller apparently didn't disclose what they needed to disclose to sell that property in the first place. So I like the idea of the program. I just don't know if we have enough information at this point to put it in place. That's my thing.
Councilmember O'Shea.
To add to the long list of things that are coming to mind that we need to do to place a value on these homes, I think we should rely heavily on whatever score the insurance company gave it. Is it a total loss? Is it a 50% loss? Are we only going to bail out the people that have a total loss? Like they cannot live there, it cannot be rebuilt, the foundation cannot be raised. Is there any value there? And rebuilding higher, I don't know, put it on stilts. Insurance companies know these things. Determining value is going to be really tough, like I say, when, something that is completely flooded and has, mold problems and sheetrock issues. So we should probably, rely heavily on the insurance claims that have been filed and what has been said by the insurance company. That would be your second source, would be insurance, your homeowner's insurance. Then also, how much are we bailing out? I hate to use bailing out, but the word flooding keeps coming to mind. I'm thinking of water, so bailing water. Are we buying the fair market value of the worthless home? Are we buying the fair market value that could have been, would have been, had this never been an issue? Are we buying out just the remainder of the mortgage loan? If somebody paid cash for their home, where does that land? There are so many questions I have right now. How many homes are we going to buy? How long are we going to continue this program? I would love to be optimistic and think that the study that we've decided to allocate monies to would tell us where we need to fix what. We can buy out only the ones that have to be bought out and everything else be handy dandy in the future, but I don't have that crystal ball. I'm extremely concerned about assuming the debt for any citizen, because then you have to do for all. So, and if you do this, I think this is why the former city attorney said, we don't do it for anyone, because there was a situation where the city stepped in. I don't remember the exact details. They rebuilt a curb that caused water to flow in a different direction and caused problems for another citizen, and then it just kind of snowballed where we were constantly chasing water. And I kind of feel like this is the same thing, that we're just going to keep constantly chasing water and now owning property, and the city is now responsible for X number of mortgages. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't know, where does the citizen's responsibility to buy wisely end, and the city's responsibility to maintain their property begin? I have a lot of legal questions. I'd love to have Daniel weigh in on any and all of them. I know he's a very busy man, but this is a huge legal issue. And I think we need some really clear guidance before we just start buying houses.
Councilmember O'Rear.
Remind me again, who would administer this program?
The Greenville County Greenville County Redevelopment Authority.
And they would make the decision on.
That was a suggestion of mine, just to remove council from having to be, the ones determining where the money's allocated, to have a third party look at those situations and make that determination based on their experience. And that takes the heat off you guys when somebody comes to you and says, why'd you buy out that property and not mine? Do you value that citizen more than you do me? Like, it would take the pressure off council.
And I understand that point, but I think we all saw election not to avoid pressure. I don't mind making harder decisions if need be, but I kind of agree with Councilmember O'Shea on one thing. I think this might need to be an ordinance of some kind that we could put our own guardrails into, instead of it becoming a free-for-all of, there is no limit. I mean, and I'm not an attorney, y'all know that, but it should be something like at our discretion type thing, maybe, versus come one, come all, and of course, and I hope y'all out there aren't getting frustrated with the dialogue up here, but, it's good to hear, like, how we deliberate, but I think you do have some problems that are a little more significant than others. I don't know if any of them could be pointed that this is actually the city's fault that this happened. And generally, from a legal standpoint, the person who damages is the one who has to pay the reparations for that damage. And in this case, that's as far as I know, is not the case. But I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to an ordinance that laid out the guardrails of this program to the discretion of maybe even running it through the planning commission, and letting them look at the severity of the issue, the area, like Sherry and the Councilmember O'Shea, Councilmember Hutchings said, could it cause a problem down the street? If maybe not. But I think it should be a discretionary issue, because it could get out of hand. And of course, we're talking about taking out a loan. I have a loan for my house. I got to pay a mortgage every month, but you get a thing on the back end of that. As soon as that house is demolished, which I don't even know who's paying for that, whatever the tax revenue from that house generates goes away too. So, and that's in perpetuity. So you just keep adding it up every year. What was the value of that property? And you lose that every year. The school loses it every year. Everyone that's funded by that tax. So it shifts even more of a burden on the taxpayer. And then, of course, the drop in the bucket is one home. But I really think it should go into an ordinance. And it should be with some parameters that do run through this council versus through a third party. I'm not gonna speak for everyone here, but I don't mind heat. I mean, that's why I wanted to help the city the best I could, but decision, by instance, I think would be beneficial in an open-ended program. So, and I would like to, and I do plan on voting to move this forward, of course, because I'd like to hear more, and maybe the mayor and I can have a dialogue about maybe some specifics that could be beneficial to everybody. So I'll be more than happy to hear more in the next meeting.
Councilmember Pinkerton.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might not have mentioned this before, but I will mention this particular property that was brought up, 206 South Almond, to clarify, to my opinion anyway, this is a city problem. I mentioned it back last year. The property is not the problem. The house isn't the problem. It's the drainage under the streets that doesn't allow water to move forward. And then when it goes forward, it isn't big enough for it to go forward. And if it goes forward, it isn't big enough to go forward again to get to Durbin Creek and proper. So I do think the city has some responsibility in this fix. I think there's alternate ways of fixing the stormwater problems. Again, it comes with a study and cost. But this is a city problem. It's because we over the years have allowed acres of water to descend not only through my backyard and to other areas into Ellen Bradshaw's property And it comes all the way from Main Street, if you know where it is. And that's only because over the years, nobody has looked at the problems, which is why I wanted to do these studies. Nobody looks at the problem of, recently we included a ordinance to have 100-year storm ordinance, right? Now, that, like I mentioned in those meetings, it doesn't affect this property at all because it's never going to do it. But now we have a program in place that says, hey, you need to do a study to make sure you're not damaging other property. This didn't happen over the years. It came. So I just want to say again, this is a city problem. There's something that we need to do. Again, I think we move this forward. We have a little bit more dialogue on how this works, and maybe we can solve it.
Councilmember O'Rear.
Just real quick, my heart would like to write you a check right this minute. I just want you to know that. I would love to just solve this. But my responsibility is to the entire city of Simpsonville, and I just want to make sure that we get this right. It's not pushback coming from me. I want to see this, I want to see the problem solved, but I want to see it done right and make sure that we're legal so that we protect the city as a whole. That's all.
All right, so a couple of comments and picking up on the thought process of council. I think it makes a lot of sense to look at this being an ordinance. I think before we ever authorize going forward with getting a loan, I think we need to have our city attorney look at what the plan is to make sure we've got a good plan and something that legally puts us in a good place. The primary driver for me on this particular question, and this is there are two pieces of property, two homeowners that I think of when I think of trying to do something now rather than several years from now, is this property and the one that Councilmember Hutchings stood there with the homeowner there. I think that they're really suffering right now, and if we can do something sooner rather than later, I think that that's a good thought process. And I feel like that I would love to have some answers from a stormwater study that give us what the right direction is to go to address these issues. But that's years down the road. I would like to get something moving forward a little sooner than that. Now, one other piece of this that comes to mind, and kind of piggyback off of what Councilmember Pinkerton was saying, is the water that affects this particular property on South Almond is coming, it actually starts on the other side of the railroad tracks on South Main, on the opposite, on the other side from Southeast Main, and works its way down through the neighborhoods and past this home. I think the thing that is new, that is possibly an out for anybody who would be on the receiving end of a lawsuit, would be disclose what? It wasn't happening 10 times in 2 years when I lived there. I think that's the aspect that we are getting more intense storms on a more frequent basis, and that's new. That is a problem, and I think that's something that a stormwater study can include in that thought process. Is okay. What do we do about that? That now the 100-year storm is the 25-year storm. So anyway, that was my thought process. But I after hearing really good thoughts from council, I'm going to amend my motion to be this. The amendment would be to make the motion to propose moving forward with considering stormwater loan buyouts. Let me start over. To propose consideration of a SCOR stormwater loan buyout program as an ordinance, with a solid program behind that to consider doing buyouts. But at this point, I'm taking out the recommendation of spending money. So propose an ordinance help me, Diana, how can I get to, what I'm wanting you to do is to move forward with putting together ordinance wording and having Daniel look at that, to make sure that we get this right and we're not getting ourselves out on a limb with this. Do I hear any suggestions from the council on how to word that?
I'd say propose a motion to investigate the language of an ordinance to administer this program.
Second, discussion on the amendment. All right, hearing none. The motion is to amend to propose an ordinance to consider this stormwater loan buyout program. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed say no. So the amendment passes by a vote of 7-0. So on the amended motion, is there any further discussion on the amended motion? Okay. On the amended motion, all those in favor signify by saying yes. Yes. All opposed signify by saying no. That motion carries by a vote of 7-0. That concludes all of the business items on our agenda. If there's no objection, we stand adjourned.